pull up the slide share, Jen. You good with that?
Yeah, we're good. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Today, we're so excited to have you. I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times, but I can't believe we're here in December and 2025 is coming to an end. And holy moly, I keep saying it over and over again, but what a strange year it has been. I think I'm ready to put 2025 to bed. How about you, Jordan? Has it been a strange one for you too? Has to be.
It went by fast for sure. I kind of reflected on it a couple of weeks back, going, "Wow, it's November, and where I am, it's dark at 4:30." So it kind of like
Yeah.
that's the signifies. Oh my God, that shows me it's the end of the year. We'll go with that. I can't speak already, so it's gonna be fun for an hour.
I got you. I know it's one of those weird, it has been one of those weird years where I can't believe we're in December, but also like it feels like it's kind of been a long year just because I feel like we've been through a lot this year. There's been a lot of things going on. But yes, winter is here. We got our first snow here in Kansas City. So it feels very wintry. Um, and all end of year things are wrapping up. How about everyone on joining us today? If you want to let us know if you're feeling anxious for the end of the year or excited for the end of the year, we'd love to hear what you're thinking in the chat. We like to know where you're joining us from and let us know your feelings on the end of 2025. Are we excited to um, see it go or feel like you've got a lot still to get done in these last few weeks of the year? I will say I still kind of feel like I've got a lot to get done, but I'm excited for a new year. I'm always kind of excited for a new year. I love a fresh calendar. I like fresh new like office supplies. It feels like the new year is a good time to get all those things out and going.
Set and immediately break those New Year's resolutions.
Yes. I feel like I have a few other webinars to ask that, but I also love when somebody has a completely outlandish New Year's resolution. So if somebody wants to tell us their like craziest New Year's resolution if they're already thinking about it. I'd love to hear that too.
Well, I'll give you the one we had a couple of years back was to trap our kids in an RV for 40 days and drive across America. So we lived that one for
You did it.
40 days and 40 nights and 14,000 kilometers, like 8,000 miles, I think is the math on that.
I
Um,
I love that one. Like that and seeing the like all of the United States, like what a great trip.
it was it was eventful. It was also super hot. It's like as a Canadian, you don't realize how hot some places get in around Death Valley and
Oh yeah.
southern Arizona.
Oh yeah. Oh, and especially being from Canada, you're like, oh man, this is truly hot.
It was like 120 in one place, like 50
Yeah.
Celsius. Like what why do people exist here? Like what
Yeah, yeah. I'm seeing lots of yachts for sure winter. Alaska. It's been winter for a while. You're probably in Alaska, you're probably getting close to your 24 hours of darkness, right? Or mostly dark. All right. Well, we've got a pretty good number of people, and I want to give Jordan as much time as possible because it's a very good topic today. So I will go ahead and get us started. Thank you again for everyone for joining us today for Mastering Data Migration. If you want to go ahead and jump to the next slide for me, Jordan. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Millett, Vice President of Event Strategy and Partnerships here at ARMA International. And if you are a member, we are so grateful to have you as a part of our community. If you are not a member, we highly encourage you to take a minute to go check out arma.org and all that we have to offer, everything from education opportunities to community opportunities to network and meet other peers in your industry to connect, make this world a little smaller, reach out to folks that are maybe facing the same challenges or celebrate wins with. And when I mentioned that we have awesome education opportunities, Jordan and his team does offer some really great um, multi-day hands-on educational opportunities. So you can check out our website or watch your inbox for more information on those opportunities. We also have certificate programs. And of course, if you're looking to truly advance your career, we have the IGP Information Governance Professional Certification that is always available. And if you are looking to recertify, there are lots of ways to get your hours in before that is due. So all of that is available on arma.org. Take a couple of minutes to go check it out. And of course, if you have any questions or needing help locating any of those things, I'm available. ARMA services available. All of those things are available at any time. So just take a second and reach out. And then on to the next. We put one event to bed and the next one is open and available. So registration is open for Info Next. And if you are not sure what's the difference between InfoCon and Info Next is a smaller event really for those who are responsible for planning and shaping the future of their information governance program. So if you are wholly responsible for your IG program or report to somebody, your CIO, very near the top of your company's org chart, that is where Info Next is the place to be. It's kind of a little bit more think tanky. It's a lot more workshopy. It's definitely a great community of people that are thinking about the future of IG policy. Things are going to be coming in the future, where InfoCon is the place where you come and implement the things that we're doing today. So that's kind of the difference between the two conferences. So if you're interested in being prepared, learning about shaping the future of IG, Info Next is the place to be. Registration is open. Lots of really great information will be coming out. I think we're getting ready to release the agenda, so keep an eye on your inbox for information on the sessions that will be offered there. But it'll be in Phoenix, going back to Phoenix, April 20th through the 22nd. Again, it's a really fantastic small conference, really great for networking, meeting other great people that just kind of really have really great future thinking ideas when it comes to information governance and AI and all the things that are coming in our industry. So take a second and check out InfoNext. And then upcoming webinars, just because the year is coming to an end doesn't mean that we stop our education programming. We actually have a ton of programming already planned. There's a couple more through the end of this year, and then we've already got January and beyond plans. So scan that QR code or again, go visit arma.org and see what we have to offer for future webinars. Lots of good stuff coming out. ARMA is offering a new series for our members. It's kind of rebuilding the Essentials of IG program. So we've just teased that. That will launch in January. If you want to go learn more information, that's also available through this QR code. But lots of good webinars continuing right on through into 2026. So take a look and see what we have to offer. And then a few housekeeping items that we always have available. We had you participate in that chat box because we want you to keep that conversation going, put your thoughts and your ideas and your experiences and kind of keep the engagement going there. But if you've got a question specific for Jordan, please put that in the Q&A box. This chat stream kind of goes quickly and we can lose the questions in there. So make sure you use that Q&A box to ask your questions there. You can also turn on subtitles if you need that feature as well. And then last, we love to use the reaction bar. So if you hear something that you like or love, give a reaction to the applause, the heart, all of those good things. We love to see reactions throughout the session today. And I think with that, frequently asked questions, we will be sharing a copy of today's slides and access to the recording. So if you want to go back and pick up on something maybe you missed or share, we will have access to all of these items later on in your inbox. Just keep an eye on the inbox that you registered for today's sessions with. That's where we will send the information to you and we'll be coming to you. And then last but not least, thank you so much to Jordan and his team. Not only is Cadence Solutions a wonderful sponsor, but they are our training partner. So they support us in many, many ways. So we hope that when you consider products and services for your organization, you consider the organizations that support you. So Jordan, with that, the show is yours.
Thank you, Jen. We didn't even talk about how mediocre those Chiefs are this year. So we'll leave that for another time. I'm a Raiders fan. If you've attended these before, Jen and I go back and forth. We can both agree now that both our teams are awful, so that makes me
Yeah,
not
they're
unhappy. So,
having rough years this year.
yeah. All right, I'm going to go through mastering data migration. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, the gray hair I have from going through many projects in implementation for content and records management, the gotchas that come with doing the migration portion of those projects, and really what we can learn by making sure our IG is in place up front and going through the tools that are going to actually help you get that migration done. The questions you want to ask IT, IT is going to be involved. They're going to have their hands in everything if we're moving data, of course. And what do we look for in terms of benchmarking that against governance in general? So I do have the chat and the Q&A over here on my right side. So if you see me look in this direction, I'm just looking to see if any questions pop up. Love the ref slagging in the chat already. So bit about myself. I'm Jordan. I am the president of the ARMA Edmonton chapter here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I've been doing content management and records management for over 20 years. I focused specifically on the data protection and the RM side of things, and that really stemmed from working at my local municipality and getting absolutely hustled by a big vendor that just couldn't deliver what we expected to be delivered when I was working there. So I founded Cadence shortly after that. Went out and started doing implementations in municipal and now in all different kinds of organizations. We're a team of 35 here strong in Edmonton, Alberta. We work all across North America. So a little bit around InfoGov in the data migration side of things. So the one thing that surprisingly we get a lot of questions on, or we ask a lot of questions on in the prospecting or the discovery calls when we first get that touch point with somebody looking to do a migration. It's like, what does success look like for the organization? And if records is involved from day one, it's we're a public organization or we're publicly traded or we're doing some exportation of energy and we have a regulation we need to adhere to. So records management is the primary driver of that migration project. Get everything into an ECM system, tag everything with a retention schedule, label, whatever it may be in the system, and be able to confidently destroy those records or archive those records when required. In a lot of other organizations, it's not strictly just getting records involved. It could be we're over storage limits in quota. It could be we're ready to get off file shares. We've had a security breach. We've had those calls as well, where it's time to get off file shares. We had a breach. Our definition of success is no more file shares. It's not about necessarily the RM component of that. Governance would be getting into a better system as opposed to putting all the intrinsic controls on it immediately. The second piece is really planning for the future. So what is the actual future state post data being in the system that you're moving to? So are we speaking about, the hoopla in the industry is Copilot, right? Are we trying to get there in 3 years, 5 years? Is that what we're looking for? Are we simply looking for everything to be under, records management and control? Are we looking for data protection on top of that, where we can't share specific documents with different parties or external parties? What does cleanup and mapping look like? So go through that here today. Talk about what helps in cleanup and mapping and the different mechanisms to do that. So if you haven't been through a migration project, well, you'll learn something there. And then, of course, the gotchas. So what does that look like in there? If you've participated in a records management migration project before, if you can just do the reaction of the thumbs up, I'd just like to kind of get a bit of a feel for the audience here in terms of who's been through this before. Excellent. So it looks like we got a few. Now, if you've never done one before, let's do the laughing, crying emoji. And I know who's new to this and is going to go through some pain. So a few honest ones in there. So maybe 10 or so of that. Excellent. So going through what's really going to make your migration project a success. So you have to find that success criteria. I've told this story quite a few times. We had one organization we worked with. Their success criteria for migration was actually number of departments migrated in. And the reason that was their success criteria is the executives got bonus based on hitting a minimum of 15 departments migrated within a year. And that was a very different metric for us to come in as a technical shop to say, oh, we're going to migrate you, but like you're just concerned with volume into system by department as opposed to retention control, or there's not an archiving project here or a space saving. It was simply a personal compensation based on the backs of this project. So it's quite different. Um, so what can make that successful in general is, are we retaining that data integrity? I cannot tell you how many times we've went through and we call it batting cleanup. We're following somebody else's, subpar work on a migration's been complete, and the create date and the modify date are set to the day of the migration instead of maintaining and preserving that day of the document and record that's come from another system or the file share. It happens time and time again. It's amateurish, um, and it's damaging long term because now you're starting over on the records clock for everything based on the migration day. Improving your data governance, that's something that everybody on this webinar here is going to be concerned with. Are we actually improving data governance going into the new system? And we're going to reference a lot of SharePoint here today. And long term, are we going to optimize business efficiency and general user experience? So for moving into SharePoint, the business efficiency side, we'll kind of park that initially. You're going to go through the stumbling at the start of a go live where users may not necessarily be used to certain things. If you've done a new information architecture, you've done a new structure, they don't know where to find their thing. But generally, user experience is more positive. The two features, regardless of all the stuff they try to sell you all the time on content management and records management, the two features users love and use all the time, one is search. Search is still a big problem that they want solved. If they can go to a search bar in SharePoint, or if you've deployed Copilot and you can search anything that's in 365, that is a problem solver and that is a solution for them. The second piece is co-authoring. Co-authoring is still the 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 premium feature without really having to do anything. You move data in, two people can edit, up to 99 people can edit the Word document at the same time, no checking in, no checking out. It auto versions it, and you can collaborate in real time on that. Very positive user experience. No need to do anything from IT or the IMIG folks. Just something you inherently get by moving the data to the right place. As we're planning for that future, we want to look at an effort and impact matrix. So we want to make our decisions based on this. And I would encourage you to put this in front of your sponsor or your stakeholders for your project and say, I want one in each category here. And then we're going to design and construct our project based on what we can hit here. And we will slice off the ones if we're running behind that maybe are a high effort, low impact that would be more of a wish list item. So something like a low effort, high impact, if we're putting that in our success definition, would be deduplication. So it's not a lot of effort from a person. We run a script, it checks if files are duplicates, produces a report that you can then choose to remove those duplicates or not migrate those duplicates into the destination. Very low effort, very high impact. IT likes that, of course. You're reducing storage costs and you're reducing runtime on the migration is one that's not thought of a lot. So something high effort, low impact would be like someone wants to rename all the files as they go in. We want to go to a naming convention. It requires someone to go in and touch every file. The impact isn't all that big as we go into a structured content management system because full text search is there. The contents of the document are served up in the search results now, as opposed to, let's say, a file share where that is not the case. Those are two examples on opposite ends of the spectrum of things that you can start to check off or tick off on your list that you may get sponsorship and stakeholder support from. So planning for the future. So user adoption. I like this, the process by which users effectively integrate and consistently use a new system. They have to consistently use it. So to achieve that adoption side of things after migration, you have to have a proper information architecture. And there's a couple key slides here that I'll call out that you should pay attention on if you're eating lunch or looking at how bad the Chiefs are this year. That's great. But setting up that information architecture, there's two rules you need in that. One, can I distinctly classify records at a location in that structure or architecture? That may be the site level, library level, a specific folder level, but at what level can we say everything in this container is an invoice, is a contract, is something that we can tie back to retention? The second piece is the usability piece tied to user adoption. Can I find my stuff? Ask yourself in the eyes of a user that probably isn't as good on a computer as you are, can I find my stuff inside of this system? So there's lots of different activities you can do. You can do the sticky note on the wall activity. If you've done that before, you hand a user a sticky note. You have your buckets taped up on the wall as pieces of paper, and you say, where would you file this invoice? Where would you file this, non-disclosure agreement if I gave you all these different buckets? And you mimic that inside of the architecture. So what's in an IA? I think most of you would be aware of this, but I'll cover it quickly here. So if we're moving into a web-based content management system, we have navigation, not just strictly taxonomy and folder structures, but different kinds of navigation. We have content hubs, we have different sites across menu bars, all things that need to be taken into account in terms of getting users to the where do I find my stuff side of things. We have the taxonomy, of course, permissions and access. What level of sharing are we going to open up? So are we going to open this up strictly internally? Are we not going to have sharing available externally? Are we labeling content specifically for that based on the permission or the sensitivity access? Confidential documents cannot be shared externally. Searching, I covered a little bit previously. There'll be the search bar in SharePoint. Also, Copilot, if that's deployed for your organization, will search the SharePoint sites that are eligible to be searched. There are blockers there if you do not want, let's say, the human resources site to be searchable. Collaborations, that's the co-authoring, the ability to send links or teams, open documents in the web version of Word, the desktop version, etc. Governance is all purview if we're talking the 365 stack, of course. And then metadata. Metadata is the filtration mechanism to get down to what we're looking for, or use that in terms of doing maybe a case closure on the record that needs to go. So the three pillars of IA, I kind of already touched on this one from a user side of things, but like, can I find my stuff? Where can I go to find my things? Where do I place my files? If I already know where to find them, I'm going to know where to put them. And that's the number one piece that we put in front of change management folks, is like, this is the change management pieces. Can they find the things? If they can't find their things, they're going to be frustrated. They're going to blame the system. It's probably not the technology. It was probably the information architecture along the way that didn't jive with how they're used to working. And then there's the governance side of things. We want to be compliant, but we don't want to impede on the user experience. And this is how a user would think. Don't make me think like a records manager. I worked one place where I called the records manager, said, you're the 1%. You are the person that understands everything about information for this entire organization, but 99% of the organization does not understand this. They don't know this. They don't care as much, and they're not going to learn it. And my story there is I had to go talk to the bus mechanics. And my goal going into this, meeting on the side of a mechanic shop was I needed them to start using the system for maintenance records. So we wanted to see the maintenance records of the buses put into the system. And this is like 14 years ago now. And I went in there, did my little training spiel, and they were kind of like, yeah, that's nice, kid. Like, I'm really not going to use this. And I kind of went back to the boss with the tail between my legs, like this didn't go as planned. And the epiphany there was the mechanic goes, I'm just here to pull wrenches. I'm not here to store documents. I barely know how to use a computer. I've been a mechanic for 30 years. I'm just going to do my maintenance records on paper, hand it off to somebody else. They can file it if we like. The governance piece we were pushing down onto the mechanics it impeded their user experience. They weren't technically competent. They didn't have the proper training to use a computer day in and day out. They were old school bus mechanics. So we didn't really have a lot of success with that internal department when I was working there. So there's the three approaches to information architecture. So it is a science, but it works for some and it doesn't work for others. So I can tell horror stories and all this, and if we catch up at a conference, I'm happy to sit down and get a beverage and go through them. But choosing your own adventure. So business units define their own structures. Users are obviously bought in as one of the pros to that. It's very flexible because they get to change it at will. It's time consuming generally for the organization because you're chasing the governance tail, chasing your own tail there because it's not standardized and you can't really apply governance because they're defining their own structures. This is likely what happened on all your file shares if you're still sitting on file shares, is there's no logic to it in terms of a governance structure and the ability to go and actually apply governance on that. You're going to need an AI tool or something to go and classify that content effectively before you can do any governance. The second piece is lockdown. So we can have a strict structure that we deploy and we force feed onto the users It will be standardized. A lot of projects were following just a retention schedule verbatim in information architecture. Pardon me. It would create a heavy change management and training activity. So the training was so heavy because we had to teach them how to find things, teach them how to think like a records manager, and it wasn't very user friendly. So the experience and the buzz around the organization was negative. Even after some of the initial testing phases, the sprawl and the virality of the message was something tough to control because it would lock down. The third option is a bit of a controlled chaos. So you have freedom at lower levels in the organization, like in the structure. There's a compromise between standardization. We need our governance pieces and freedom. And it doesn't use as much time in the change management and training side of things. So what this would be is we're going to distinctly classify records, let's say generally at level 3 in our tree. It may be, department function, subfunction, or something like that. Inside of that subfunction, we open it up to that department. So let's say we're doing procurement. We have procurement, we have vendors. They're going to sort them by vendor name. So they'll have Cadence. And then inside of Cadence's folder, they can do whatever they want. They can have a folder for each contract we do each year. They can dump it all in one spot. We're not really concerned as governance folks because we're going to go tag all that stuff up at that procurement level or potentially even one sub level below that. And then it's all controlled from us and they can create the chaos they like underneath that level. The important piece here is I love this quote: continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. I see a lot of folks struggle with their taxonomy, struggle with the retention schedule to a perfection state before starting anything and trying to improve upon it. This isn't concrete when you roll out an information architecture. It can be changed. We want to elicit feedback. We want to probably go to a 1.5 or a 2.0 on it when we're ready. And that's okay. And if you're clear about that up front with your stakeholders and your sponsors, you're going to get a lot of support from the users too. We'll roll this out. We'll come back in 6 weeks. Let's see what works and what doesn't work. And we can actually go pull metrics to say, nobody saved files in this location. Did you not get any content for that? Is this a year-end area that we don't need yet and it's just empty because of that? Or is this something that you're avoiding the whole system and filing them somewhere else? So in terms of cleanup and mapping, there's two ways to approach this. Just like any kind of cleaning, we can do it proactively or reactively. So kids, kitchens, you know how that goes, right? It's a reactive cleanup. Why did you make this mess? I got 2 kids, go clean it up. Proactively, we want to go and identify and manage the rot before the migration begins. So if we are coming out of an unstructured system, so file shares, we work with organizations that go through M&A activities and they acquire a company and they acquire the mess. We want to clean that up before we want to reduce the time to perform the project as well as the runtime to perform the migration because it's expensive. You're paying consultants, you're probably paying for software, everything's time boxed or consumption boxed. And you want to make sure you get that out of the way before you have to go and use that. And there's some tools or a tool I'll touch on later that can help with this. The reactive side, and we've seen a few folks do this, is they'll put everything in 365 and they'll start letting retention and sensitivity rules flag, as well as tag the data for removal. So for disposition through records, or if we're doing sensitive stuff, it will find, social security numbers in a document, flag that as sensitive, and then we could potentially move that or map that differently. So essentially you're using SharePoint as a landing zone first, put it all in, cleanse it with some of the SharePoint tools and Purview tools that are in place, and then move it to the clean site after. So file share, messy site, and then off to clean site. Proactively, it's clean the file share, move to one SharePoint site that's structured with your information architecture. So on the cleanup and mapping side, where would that fall on your impact and effort level? So generally, we're following, it's a high impact, and the level of effort is really going to depend on the mess that you've made. If we're using specific tools, it can be a low effort and a high impact. We have a tool here that does AI and machine learning classification of content based on your content. So it's a low effort, but it's a really high impact. It does take some runtime, but it will identify documents and records that are similar and flag those for migration. If we're doing mapping one by one in an Excel sheet that I know this location is going to this location, so target or source and then target destination, that's a really high effort. It's a high impact, but it is a high effort, and it is one of those activities you're going to do once per each business unit or department or division in terms of how you're rolling that out. So it really is going to depend on your success definition. Does this come back to we're an archiving project? We're a storage reduction project? We're a governance project? What is that when we're actually doing a migration? And fortunately, being in my position where I get to talk to many different industries and clients, we get as many inbound requests from IT directly as we do from the RM folks now for the migration side of things. The days of procuring, E5 from Microsoft and kind of maybe letting that idle a little too long are starting to end. And the uptick in moving data into those into that platform has started from IT actually wanting to do it as opposed to just kind of rolling it out and saying, just please start using it. So we have three mapping types we can walk through if we're going to go through and do a cleanup and mapping. So destination mapping, that, source to target destination. How do we go through and do that? Map your source locations and do it at the folder levels and the highest folder level you can get to logically do that. It's going to save you the most time. And generally, if you have like a reasonable user base that was a little bit structured and saving, you're going to save a lot of time. There's always those OCD users that you like when you look at the data and it's got the naming convention the same and the folders are all the same and the dates are using the ISO standard of year, month, day. So it sorts beautifully. That's all positive stuff and makes your life a lot easier when you're doing that destination style mapping. From the metadata mapping, so we want to preserve the integrity of that data. I mentioned that create date, modified date, those should not change. We want to bring those in to the new system. We also want to potentially tag any other metadata on the way in. So if we're going through a contracts area and we're doing our disposition off of the end date, it's an opportunity to scrape the contents of that contract document, identify the end date, put that into a metadata field as a part of the migration and mapping, and then perform disposition in the landing system. So the target system, likely we'll say SharePoint in this example. So we can then run that through Purview or another records engine to dispose of that contract. So it is an opportunity to do that as a part of the migration side of things. And then there's the permission side of things. So this is the one that the RM folks, struggle with, I would say, the most, because it's not in their nature and in their day-to-day role. It's like, who should have access to this, and how does that roll up technically in the ecosystem? So we want to let our information architecture define our new permissions. How that's rolled out used to be Active Directory. Now it's called Entra in the cloud. We want to use the groups from there. Groups go on locations. Users go in groups. That's the tip. Groups go on locations. Users go in groups. If somebody wins the lottery, we put a different user in that group. The same role is tied to that group. Permissions don't need to change. We're not chasing our tail a year from now when there's a reorg or somebody left the organization or we have a high turnover. We're just moving different people into groups. And the real tip is that's IT's job to do that. You just give them the rules for it. So some common gotchas is don't over-engineer the new system. I mentioned this earlier without even being prompted by this slide, but the delayed perfection strategy is going to get you in trouble. You're not going to make any progress internally. People will start questioning the value of the actual project you're looking to accomplish. And we want to make sure that we're not hoping for everything to be perfect on day one, and we're not taking that big bang approach and rolling it out across the whole org all at once. Let's control what needs to be controlled. We don't have to go over the top on it. We don't need to do sensitivity labels day one. It's nice, but let's get everything into the system. Let's get the records retention on it if that's your initiative. And then let's circle back around and start doing sensitivity labels on what's confidential, highly confidential, what should be restricted. How do we do sharing controls on that info? Remember the success statement and arrogantly remind your stakeholders and sponsors of this as well as you go through your steering committees and you go back to them regularly as the project's being delivered. Say, remember what we're here to do. This is what we're here to do. We're here to migrate 15 departments within 18 months. That is our metric. We're not here to automate workflows. We're not here to go play around in Microsoft Forms or touch Copilot. We're not here to do that. We are simply here to migrate these 15 departments over the next year and a half. Another gotcha. Do we need to migrate multiple versions? We get this one a lot. So if I'm coming out of, let's say, OpenText, and OpenText has a version history on files, let's say our max we set in that system was up to 20 versions per file, and then it would roll over in OpenText. And we're looking to migrate from OpenText into SharePoint. Do we migrate all the versions of every file? That creates a lot more work in your migration. It actually creates a lot of complexity as well because you have to migrate the versions in a stacked order and then inject them or ingest them in the same order. So it can create a lot more work. So maybe you got a million documents, but if you got 20 versions of each, now we got 20 million documents to migrate it. Preserve the modified and created dates, the most obvious one in the history of migrations from an IG lens. Still surprised it gets missed. So I'm going to walk you through one of our methodologies, and this is one of like the 2 or 3 slides you really need to pay attention to in the whole webinar, and Jen stuff at the start, of course. We got to pay attention to Jen. So I'm going to walk you through an example if we're moving from file shares to SharePoint Online and what that would look like. So the first thing we do is data identification. So what do we have on our file share? What are we assessing for volume, structure, usage? We would work with the client to identify departmental priorities and determine the areas targeted for migration. So let's say we're in a municipality and we're working with procurement. And in procurement, we want to take all vendor files that are active. We're only concerned with active and ongoing vendors. We're going to leave the dormant ones, the ones that we no longer do business with aside. And we're going to start documenting those security requirements, those access controls, and we're going to make sure that compliance is involved with us, the records folks, to make sure that we're informing the migration strategy around that. So identifying what we're actually going to target for migration and where that's going to land. Then we go through and define that information architecture. So we're going to SharePoint, so we need site hierarchy, we need departmental requirements, we need records retention, we need to determine our records engine. Are we going Purview natively? Are we adding on something like AvePoint because maybe we have physical records in our radar as an organization in the future? What are we looking at for permission mappings? Is there a security plan that needs to align? Do we have SharePoint in use already? Do we have existing access controls that we can use or that we're encouraged to use or forced to use by IT? And then we look at the migration plan side of things. So department specific plan. So if we're going into procurement, we're probably not going to do this at a year end. It's going to be painful for them. We're going to time that around Q2 for them. Not as much money is moving within their department, so they're not as busy. What are we looking at for a migration tool? And what are we looking at for resources to do the migration? Is that a system? Is that a consultant? Is that internal folks? Who's on call? Are we taking an outage for this? Is it going over a long weekend or a break or evenings or daytime? So all those factors kind of start to come into the planning and really the information architecture side of things. Then we configure SharePoint as per what's been defined. So sites, libraries, security, permissions, we're testing the migration tool, and we're validating all of that configuration back with that procurement department. So, hi, Sally, how does this look? Hi, Johnny, how does this look? If I gave you this document, where does it go? Do you know where to put it? Do you know how to use search? Is this intuitive? And we're giving ourselves all those little check marks and really coaxing that user along the change management path without really calling it that. We're just involving them along the whole way. The next piece is the pre-migration validation. And if a project's going to fall apart technically, it falls apart because this stage doesn't exist. When you're moving things into SharePoint, there's a lot of gotchas that are going to happen. You can't have certain characters. You can't have paths that are too long. The path it's pulling from off the file share is too long. And you run into all these complications. So you have to do a pre-migration validation check to make sure that anything that's incompatible flags now. Are there files we need to remediate? Are there 0-byte files? So those temporary files, those 0 KB files, those are all landmines that we run into if you don't do a pre-migration validation. And if you went through a poor migration, maybe give it a thumbs up in the reaction so I know. And if you've run into those kinds of issues, I just like to hear about either in the chat or anywhere else because it seems to be still pretty common. I think everybody hit a thumbs up there. Um, then you do a pilot migration. So set up that pilot migration, test the migration accuracy and alignment. I like to see like 5 to 10% of content coming from here. And what I mean by that, I don't mean take the first folder and take all of it in if that's 5% of the total volume. I mean, spread that across. Let's take 3 documents from every folder off of our file share and move that into our information architecture and give that a test. That's a true test of can we grab from location? Do we encounter those anomalies? And does the user, after we've done this validation, understand how this works? Full scale migration, we get the thumbs up after the validation, and we're all in. We start notifying users. We communicate a migration schedule, that anticipated downtime. Is this a daytime activity, weekend activity, long weekend, nighttime? Are we doing this a few hours a night for a week? What does that look like in terms of disruption or coordination with users? Run the full migration, produce a document level audit trail. I mean, and there's some tools out there that can't do this right now. And I won't name them because they'll go back through the recording on me. They will say they can migrate everything in, but they won't give you the trail of where it went to. So you end up chasing your tail. You don't actually know if that content went in. You just get summary statistics that say, oh, we were supposed to migrate 5,000 documents. We migrated 5,000. Great, I can give myself a check mark. If we're supposed to migrate 5,000 documents and we migrated 4,990, I got to go find the 10 that didn't go in. Very painful. Do you want to report detailing the various aspects of the migration, number of files that errored, anything that needed to be remediated. And then the last piece is the go live side of things. Hypercare kicks in. You want to send a transition email out to the users. Hi, it's Monday. We migrated everything from the file share. We've now set the file share to read only. So you will still see the X drive as you log into my computer, but you can no longer save files there. If you need to edit a file, we encourage you to go to SharePoint over here as per the training, yada, yada. If you get in a jam and you can't find it in SharePoint because we have a new information architecture, by all means, revert back to the file share for the next 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, we're going to remove that X drive from my computer and you'll be solely in SharePoint. And that's a nice, easy transition strategy to use with those users and departments that you're onboarding. We deliver those training sessions and maximize the adoption there. So I'd encourage you, pull out your screenshot tool, take a screenshot of this screen. I'll grab a sip of coffee and we'll get on to the next one here. So the folks in the chat, I do see a few questions popping up there. I'll open it up at the end and answer those for you. Couple different tools and things you want to look for in a tool if you're going to go through and do a migration. So things that must have, can it migrate from my source to destination? So if you're coming out of an ECM system, this can be more complicated. Highland on Base, OpenText, Alfresco, FileNet. Do you have a utility that can go in there and grab that data effectively, preserve those modified and create dates, and actually do the destination mapping into, let's say you're going to SharePoint? Can it support metadata, permissions, and then the multiple version question you'll see is bolded there. That's the big one. Are we supporting multiple versions? Are we bringing across all of that content? Do you get item level reports and statistics? And can they prove a speed test to you? So Microsoft throttles SharePoint in terms of ingestion. There is no metric that's published on that, on what it is. You can infer that from going through many projects and many different migrations in terms of what's viable and what isn't in terms of data going in per day. This is one of the pieces, if we back up, that we want to do in our pre-migration validation as well. We want to do a performance test. How much data did we get in during this period of time? Because throttling can really get you. Those are the must-haves. The nice-to-haves is, can we do multiple sources to destinations? Can I pull from a file share and OpenText and move it to SharePoint all in one interaction? That's nice to have. Is there proactive error detection? I think, was it Wendy, somebody else in the chat there, Carissa mentioned, the file names and file paths too long has been a problem. That's on there. Restricted characters, metadata issues. Is it more than a migration tool? Can it do anything else? Can it do content analytics? Can it do deduplication? Can identify duplicates? Is there any routing logic? If a document contains this word, go do this thing. So if you do have those, OCD or very, we'll say proper users, we can use some of their logic in the past to route that. Can you apply retention and sensitivity as a part of the migration? So a couple different ways to do this. One, it's where you land. So if you're landing in SharePoint, you can apply it on the container, the folder, the site, and inherit upon document creation. Really easy to do. Sensitivity is a little more difficult, but can a tool do that? Now for us, after going through however many migrations I've been through, we built a tool called Peregrine. Peregrine is the fastest bird, so that is the theme behind the tool that supports the legacy ECM platforms. So I kind of joke, I've collected the whole set of ECM platforms, and now they're all in the migration tool. OpenText, Documentum, OnBase, Laserfiche. We got on-demand FileNet in there as well. It's data governance focused, and we've been using it a lot. We've even used it in the Fortune 500 recently to migrate an organization off of OpenText into SharePoint. I'll touch on that in a second as well. So a couple questions to ask IT as we're going through this is one that gets tripped up a lot is there adequate storage space on both the source and destination locations? So if we're moving out of, let's say, an OpenText and we want to download everything to a file share, do we have enough storage in our server room, our SAN, to do that? If we're migrating all that into SharePoint, are we going to break any quota thresholds that we have with Microsoft? Are we going to get charged for this? Do we have proper licensing for each application? So if we're going to migrate in 1,000 users into E5, do we have licenses for that? Do they have the right licenses deployed? And do they have a list of any integrations that are in both systems that we need to be aware of? Any batch jobs that are running behind the scenes at night or weekends or year end or quarter end, whatever it may be. What are those integrations that IT knows that we generally don't know on the governance side of things? We're not as familiar with that stuff in terms of all the strings and bubble gum that's going on back there. Do we have a disaster recovery plan? Have they tested it? Is a good follow-up to that one. And if you go to a change board, that's a great question to ask. You look like a hero if they've actually tested the DR plan and was it successful. We've had clients test them and not be successful and just kind of move on and not worry about that. I would worry about that. And what's the rollback strategy? Has a rollback strategy been put in place and has that been tested as well? If we're doing this off hours, who's required? Who's available? How do I get a hold of them? And what's the monitoring and reporting process and schedule for this? So if we're monitoring, who's monitoring the migration job? Who's reporting on it regularly? How do we know if it stops at 3 a.m. if we're running this thing overnight? Does an alert go off? Does it call somebody? What happens? And one of the just really simple spreadsheets I've used for years is this. So you do the work breakdown structure. You have a task and an owner, start and a finish date, an escalation contact, and actually at the bottom of this, you'll list all the phone numbers out of everybody that's involved. Upon going into the production migration, we'll actually take this, put it right in the email body, and just strike out line by line as things go through. So everybody's in constant communication on who's up next to do the next task. There's no, oh, I didn't get your email or I didn't check the spreadsheet. It's all right in front of them the entire time. Project manager should own this piece, but this is a good little migration action plan that works. So post-migration success. So if we're looking at data validation and data integrity, we want at least two statistics: the number of files scanned from the source system, so how many files are we actually pulling in, and the number of files that were migrated into the destination system. So if we scanned 1 million, but we're only moving 950,000, what happened to that 50,000? Were they 0-byte files, temporary files, file formats we didn't like? We're not going to move the WordPerfect files into SharePoint. That's not something we're going to do. They're old. They should be disposed of. What are those statistics that we can go forward with? We want to make sure that the numbers match in terms of files migrated to destination system and that the total source, every file is essentially accounted for. We want to remove all access from the source system post-migration. I mentioned that we would flag the file share as read-only for a number of weeks typically, and then start to remove it from the actual connection in my computer for the users. And IT can do what they like with it, then archive on tape, archive in cloud, whatever needs to be done. Dispose through records retention is also an option. What are the KPIs for tracking in your success definition. So if we're improving data governance, that's the records classification rate. So have that before the project, have that at the start of go live, and have that ongoing, and show the growth of data in that. So we now have 7 million records under governance and under retention. What's our destruction volume? What's our data loss rate? Is there anything that we didn't bring in, and what was that? Um, are we going through and optimizing business efficiency? So what's the usage on the system? You can get those statistics, average time on tasks, and user satisfaction rate. Little tidbit here, we rolled out a workflow for an insurance company. Workflow steps are all the same for all of the claims processing people, but they would actually do the analytics on how long it took Sally to do this step versus Johnny, and they could go back and say, well, Sally does this always in 2 minutes, and it takes Johnny 10 minutes because he's drinking too much coffee and chatting around the office. So you can kind of use some of those statistics to go back and look at the business efficiency and the efficiency of tasks being delivered by individuals. The effective records practices post migration. So I mentioned before, this isn't concrete. Once you're done, you're able to make changes. Don't just set it and forget it and walk away from it. Go back to the departments, go back to the users, ask them what works well, what doesn't, and iterate that back into the next deployment for the next department if you're going group by group, which is the way I would encourage this to be rolled out. I got 3 quick stories, and then I'll jump into Q&A here. I see a couple landing in the question and answer side of things. So one of the larger projects we did was a Fortune 500 organization. They're moving from OpenText Cloud to SharePoint. Getting data out of OpenText Cloud was ridiculously hard from we'll say a politics standpoint. I'll leave it at that. If you have questions, or if you're in the OpenText Cloud and trying to get out of it, my contact information will be at the end. I will tell you the whole story on a separate call. They used the Peregrine tool to do this. We moved 2 terabytes of data out and got that off into SharePoint Online, and did a few process modernizations as well that were built into OpenText that needed to be recreated on the SharePoint side of things. Municipal government, something that's close to my chest in terms of where I've spent a lot of time. This was one of our initial clients that we moved out of OpenText. Actually, we moved them into OpenText about 12 years ago, and then they wanted to modernize and go into SharePoint. Use the Peregrine tool to move that data out, do some deduplication, and bring that into the modern world in SharePoint. Third one here is in utilities. Utilities, heavily regulated, always in the content management game. Migrated a ton of data, 5 terabytes across 20 departments, and did rock cleanup and those kinds of assistant styles of things. Now, what Jennifer was mentioning a little bit earlier was some of the training that we do as we're certified with ARMA. We do have a few new courses that are coming out. We have the tried and true ones at the top there, records management through Purview. eDiscovery has been revamped based on Microsoft changing the Purview eDiscovery side of things. And then we brought back data loss prevention and information protection. We have launched the Teams Information Governance Essentials. We see a lot of demand for governing data within Teams because of its SharePoint backend there that is not very well understood. And Copilot. Copilot enablement is a big thing. IT and CIOs are pushing for this, but governance is a thorn in their side, and that's a good thing for us right now. It's a good thing that we're going to get a governance moment out of AI being pushed and really just brought into organizations when the governance maybe isn't where it needs to be, or the executives have ignored it for too long. So there's a discount there and a QR code. Looks like we got one question. Will you get the slides? Absolutely, you'll get the slides. You can go through these and put yourself to sleep by replaying this presentation at any point. This is my contact info, but I'll open it up for any questions right now as well. So if I'll go through the ones in the Q&A. I see Jen's lit up there as well, but happy to.
Yeah, Jordan, if you want to go through, I wasn't sure if you'd answered some of these or not, but if anyone would like to come on live and ask your question, just raise your hand, use that raise your hand feature, and we will allow you to unmute your mic and you can ask live. Also, it's kind of a fun engagement tool that we've enabled in Zoom. So it's been a fun feature. Oh, we have somebody who wants to do it. So Jarrell, you go ahead and answer these first questions.
I'll queue them up in order here. So we got one in. What is your favorite thing about migration projects? What's something that pumps up your tires that you also could be something you'd celebrate as a selling feature about doing a migration? And then there's some snarkiness after that. And I know who sent this in. So The favorite thing about it, honestly, is the end. Everybody knows that. It's finishing it. We're actually seeing it execute. So as you're seeing the data go in, you're like, this is actually happening, and we're going to finish this. Something you sell to the users as like this is going to be better is you will be able to find your stuff, and you will not have to check out a document or get that prompt if you're coming from a file share that says Jen has this checked out and she's at the beach for the next 2 weeks. And good luck getting access to that spreadsheet. So that's what I would encourage you to go back to the users with on that one. Second one, can you list some of the more common platforms you've been migrating into lately? I'm at a law firm, but interested in general. SharePoint 9 times out of 10. SharePoint embedded is coming online as well. If you're not sure what SharePoint embedded is, think of it as SharePoint without the user interface, but with all the purview controls. So if you've built a custom system internally with very poor doc and records management, you can use SharePoint's horsepower behind the scenes. We've had some migrations go into Azure Blob Storage and OpenText as well. Still two very common ones. Unfortunately, we don't get a lot of calls in the legal space. We're not in that, but I know that there's the usual suspects there in terms of what's that repository they always use in legal. eDocs was popular for a very long time. iManage is another one, but I don't see that directly in my role.
Before we jump, let's let Eileen come on and ask her question.
Excellent.
Eileen, if you want to unmute, you can ask your question.
Am I,
Eileen, if you could hear.
am I
There
unmuted?
you
Okay.
are.
Oh, good. Okay. Thank you so much. So I lots of conversation about open text to SharePoint. Um, I'm looking at a share drive to open text actually. And I was just wondering, I'm sure you've been through that as well, Jordan, and if you have any words of wisdom for that type of situation, um, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, it'll sound like a prison sentence, but I did like a decade in that. So of shared drives to OpenText. My one tip is OpenText is not like the colon in names. So that's the one no character going into content server is a colon. So
Okay.
anytime you run into an email where you have like reply RE colon, it's going to throw up as it does the migration. So you
Ah,
have to cleanse that one out. Generally, any other character is allowed. So that would be my one tidbit that I'd watch
okay.
for. Um,
Okay.
and it gets you an emails forward, replies, anything that's been saved to
That's
the shared
very
drive as an
interesting.
email.
Okay. That's good to know. All right.
Other than that, I'm happy to give you a whole 30 minutes of that, Eileen. If you want to reach out an email, I can talk you
Okay.
talk you through that for sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, then we've got some big questions here. So, from an anonymous attendee, do you have any additional reasons to migrate from network file shares to Microsoft 365 that we can share with our leadership? We wouldn't need to pay for staffing, servers, and security of network file shares, especially since we're already paying for storage security with our M365 user licenses. M365 has a lot of features we're already paying for that we don't have with the network file share, retention, sensitivity labels, etc. Any reasons that we would need to keep our network file share, perhaps regulations or organization policies preventing storage in the cloud.
Well, I think you listed the benefits pretty well. The one I would list in there is the executives are going to be excited about AI because they've just been really indoctrinated with the industry in that. So I would put that one in there. You can be co-pilot ready by moving the data. There is still a reason to keep file shares. There's a lot of files that don't play nice in content management. So anything in the Adobe suite, so Illustrator, Photoshop, a lot of AutoCAD doesn't work either. The files that are made up of referring files don't work well in content management generally. So that's from my OpenText days, that's from my SharePoint days. That is one reason you will keep some level of that kept for collaboration on those content types locally or on a file share. I would pitch them on Copilot, or at least test the waters on their appetite for it. I think that would give you a lot of direction on what's important to them. But you nailed it on retention and sensitivity labels and having a system you're not utilizing every feature.
All right, Melanie has a question. It looks like there was somebody else was going to ask it as well, so this is a good one. We have decades worth of unstructured file share content, and a good chunk of which has no known users. Examples, programs now defunct or moved around to various groups over the years. Any best practices, lessons learned to get around this? There's some of this that would be rot. It certainly wouldn't all be.
So shameless plug, Melanie. I gave a webinar on this 2 months ago, maybe Jen,
Yep.
pre-InfoCon, I think,
Yep.
on classification and the rock cleanup and classification side of these exact projects. And we have another tool called Peregrine Classify that does the classification based on the machine learning of your content to perform rot analysis to flag it for migration if it's something you want to keep. So I can give you a demonstration of that, or you can replay the webinar from October something, 10th in there. Um, and that's something that I faced a lot in doing the projects is nobody wants to do the cleanup. They didn't make the mess, they don't want to do the cleanup. And that is a massive change management hole that just couldn't be solved. That is a great use of technology now. It would not have worked 5 years ago in terms of what it's capable of.
And I have asked to find the link to that session so we can get that out to you guys real quick.
So,
And then I think we have time for one more. Oh, we're actually the top of the hour. We'll ask one more. Migrating files with long file names or file paths can be problematic. How do you solve that?
so simply we'll truncate the name. If we're pulling from the path and the tool you're using, your script you're using is not working correctly with that, you have to flip it to a UNC path. That's too technical. So instead of it saying X slash and then the full path, it would just be two backslashes and then the full path. And you can go many more characters that way. I have gray hair for a reason, for sure. So
Jordan, do you have a few more minutes? We can stay on for
yeah,
those who do, and those who don't, feel free to drop off the record. If you want to catch the end of this, we'll keep on recording. Um, and then there's a follow-up to that. Aren't spaces in file names worth several characters?
correct. Yeah, it is.
Yep.
It is a character.
Yep. And do you have any tips for migrating out of SharePoint?
I'd like to know which SharePoint, if we're talking online or on premise. So if Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous can reply to that one.
Yeah. And then one more anonymous attendee.
Maybe
We
that's the
also,
one. It's SharePoint 2016 to SharePoint Online. I see that. Sorry, Jen, I jumped
yep.
in there.
Yeah.
We're in the process of migrating from SharePoint 2016 to SharePoint Online. The new IM introduces folders. One subset becomes a library with layers of folders. Well, the actual migration is concerned. Applying governance in the new environment is. Any advice you can give on that? Use the inheritance principle as high up as you can. Hopefully, your information architecture plays nice with that because you want to inherit the label downwards in SharePoint Online onto the content. So if we're in the contracts library and the labels for contracts, and we're going to treat them all the same, label the library and leave everything else flow as the user wants it to.
All right. And one last question. What key changes to SharePoint has made this a records management system instead of a collaboration tool?
Purview in general. Um, Even when the compliance center was Purview used to be called the compliance center, that switch came around, I think, late 2022, maybe early 23. Microsoft started getting serious about governance and making it more RM focused. Now, is it perfect as a records management tool? No, it's not, but it is miles ahead of where it was. If you do need a heavier lift on records within SharePoint, let's say you need to do physical records, then you do need to look at a third party. AvePoint, RecordPoint are two that kind of lead the industry in that space. Full disclosure, we're a partner with AvePoint, but that is where I would look. It is much more modern. The other piece of going into SharePoint that is seldom talked about from the RM community is the data protection and data security side of it now. The fact we can block files that Jordan shouldn't share with ARMA today, right? Because of the sensitivity nature of it. The two-factor authentication, the Teams collaboration. They really created a monster in a good way of all the ecosystem working together and putting the governance over top of all of it, not just SharePoint.
All right. Well, we are over our time, so we will um, bring this session to a close. Thank you, everyone, for your time and for joining us today. Jordan, thank you for your time and your expertise today. As always, it was a great session. Please, everyone, keep an eye on your inbox as we will share today's session and slides with you again to the email that you used to register for today's session. Also, keep an eye out for future sessions and more information about all the things that ARMA has to offer. If we don't see you on a future webinar before the end of the year, we wish you a happy holidays and a very happy new year. And if not, we hope to see you on one of our few webinars we have remaining throughout the rest of the year. And with that, thank you so much.